Welcome to Mesa Family History. In this, our last lesson, we're going to learn how to use sources. Now, what is a source? A source is a record that was created at the time of the event or at some point afterwards that verifies or shows that our person existed and the information that we have in here is accurate. I tend to think of it as endnotes or footnotes for a research paper, but on an individual. So I use sources to get to know my person and to do further research. But before we go in and look at sources, what I want to do is get to know my person a little bit better so that I have some idea of who they are when I'm looking at their sources. So I'm going to scroll through his person page and remind myself of when he was born and where he was born. I'm going to look at his residences. I can see that he lived in Missouri his entire life. I can see that we have no marriage events, so perhaps as I'm looking at sources, I'm going to be looking for that information. We do not have a maiden name for his wife, so that's another thing that I would like to be looking for. We have information on his children. It's possible that we could get their death information from a source. We can see information about his parents over here and who his siblings are. So now that we have a general overview of who our individual is, we are going to go into the sources. So up here across the top, we have a source tab, and I'm going to click into that. Now that I'm into sources, I like to put them in order. I don't like to be jumbled and have a death date before a birth date. So the first thing I am going to do is come up here to options and click on this. And if I check chronological, it will put all of his information in order from the year he was born until the year he died or information after that. We have one entry down here, though, that does not have a date. I'm going to go ahead and enter a date here so that this record, too, will go in chronological order. This is information on his birth, and I've already looked to make sure it is his birth record. If I look up here at the top, I can see he was born in 1886, so I'm just going to add that date in. I'm going to enter it right here, 1886. I'm going to click on Standardized, and I'm going to come down here and click Save. So now all of the information is in chronological order. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the information that we have. We have a birth record, so let's go ahead and take a look at that and see what can we learn from a birth record. I'm going to click on View Source, and I am going to come down here and click on this URL because that's a hot link to take me to information about him. So I'm going to click on that, click OK. And this has taken me into Ancestry.com, which I have a membership in as part of being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We do get free access to Ancestry, and so we can set that up if you do not have that set up. But what I want to do is look at this birth record. So I'm going to actually click into View here. Now, I know, because I've been in here, that he is the third one from the bottom. I'm going to enlarge this, and we're going to look and see what we can find. It talks about James, or it shows that he's James Frank Holrath. It shows his birth year and his birthplace. This column here is the nationality of his father. So we've now learned that his father is German. We've learned where his father is born. We've learned this is the nationality of his mother. We can see that she is American and that she, too, was born in Missouri. We can see his mother's full name here, Georgia, and this is actually a T, Holrath. And this is her maiden name, Georgia T. Rhine. And this becomes very important for us to make sure as we go through records that her name is entered correctly. This record was made at the time he was born. So we would trust this record of his mother's maiden name over a record of when he dies. So we can see her maiden name. We can see his father, that it's Henry A. Holrath, and that he is a laborer. And this last column is actually who his doctor was. So this just gives us some information about our individual. I'm going to go ahead and close this record. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to X out of this record here. So now this is another birth record. We're not going to go in and take a look at that. Let's go ahead and look at our next record, which is a 1910 census. So I'm going to view my source, and I can come in and I can actually look at information right here that has been indexed. This shows who his father and his mother are. And his father is Frank, his mother's Frida. His wife is Frida, not his mother. So we have Frank and his wife Frida and his son Frank. I actually want to go into this record and take a look at it and see if I can learn any information. So I'm going to go ahead and click into this record. This is a census record. Census records are wonderful because they show entire families. This is a 1910 census record, and 1910 census records are really wonderful because they show when a person was married and how many children they had. So our first step here is to enlarge this enough to see. And we are fortunate our individual is right up here as the second entry, so we can also see what the titles are across the top. So we have Frank, Frida, and Frank again. We have that he is the head, she is the wife, and his son Frank has been born. If we come right over here, it shows that they have been married one time, and it shows that they have been married for 2 years. Now, this is a 1910 census. We were missing their marriage date. We don't know exactly when they were married, but we know it had to have been in about 1908. So we can enter that information because we have now learned it from a census record. Now, we know his mother was born in Missouri, and Frank was born in Missouri. His wife was born in Missouri, and his son was born in Missouri. So I'm actually going to make the leap of faith that they were married in Missouri. I don't know where, but at least I have, from an educated guess, when and where he might have been married. I can scroll through here and learn more information about where his father was born. His father was born in Indiana. We can learn about his mother's family or his wife's family. As we go through, we can learn that they spoke English and that his father, or that he was a laborer in the railroad. And so there's lots of information that we can learn from a census record. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this census record, and we are going to come up and X out of it. So we have learned that he was married about 1908 and that it was in Missouri, and we'll eventually go in and add that information. We're going to go ahead and skip the 1920 census, in that it's a great census to look at, but it's similar to the 1910, and I want to go on down. We're going to look at his World War II draft record. I'm going to click on View Source, and somebody has actually entered his draft record as a memory. So let's go ahead and click on it and take a look at it. Hopefully it will load here very quickly. Come on, load. All right, there we go. So we can learn his name again, where he's residing at this point in time in West Alton, St. Charles, Missouri. We can see that he's 59, that he was born in Perry County. We have his birth date and year and where he was born. We have the name of his wife and where she is residing, which is probably where he lived as well. We can see that he was a fisherman. Now I can take this date of where they lived and I can plug it into Google, which I've actually done up here. So we're going to go over to my third tab, and we're going to take a look at the home that they lived in. So this is 2310. Let's go back and look at the record. He was in 2309 North 9th Street in St. Louis. This is 2310. 2309 is across the street, and it's hidden right over here behind trees. So I'm actually going to look at 2310 because it's just a little easier to see what this might have looked like. So this is the home, or a similar home as to what they lived in the time when he was drafted for World War II. And we can come back and take a look at that date in 1942. So this is what their home looked like in 1942. And we've learned that from going into the sources. So I'm going to go ahead and X out of that and X out of his draft record. And I am going to scroll back up and close this. So we've learned a little bit about his wife, or when he was married, where he was married, what his home looked like. We're going to go ahead and look at his death certificate here. I'm going to click on View Source, and I'm going to click on the blue URL, and I'm going to click OK and go into the Missouri government site where it shows birth and death certificates. And we can see in here, we learn a little bit more information about him. We can see that he was divorced right here in the middle. Unfortunately, you don't get my little red circle around my pointer, but he was divorced right here in the middle. If we scroll down just a little bit, we can see his father's name. So right over here is his father's name, Henry Holrath. It shows his mother's name is Thistle Rhine. Well, we know her name was Rhine. She was Georgia T. Rhine. So now we have a middle name, or a likely middle name, for his mother. So we have gained that from his death certificate. We can look through it and see if there's any other missing information. But for the moment, we're going to go ahead and close this. So now we are back into his record, and I'm going to X out of this, and we are going to look at his Find a Grave. I can click once again on the blue URL, and it will take me to the partner site of Find a Grave. Actually, I guess it's going to take me to the FamilySearch site, and then over here to the right, I'm going to click on Find a Grave. Once I'm in Find a Grave, I have more information about him, listing his children, and a short little bio on him. So this is wonderful. I can see that he's buried with his brother, which makes sense because he was divorced and his brother never married. So this just gives me a little more information about the family. I'm going to go ahead and X out of this, and I will go ahead and X out of this, and I'm going to come back into another source, which is a Social Security application. I'm going to click on View Source, and once again, I'm going to click on the blue URL, and I'm going to click OK. And this is going to take me to Ancestry.com, and this is a Social Security application for his daughter, Mildred Florence Holrath. She married a Heron. In here, it shows her father's name and her mother's name. We now have a maiden name for her mother, and it is Hartman. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down so that I have it. So we've learned a little bit about this individual by going through the sources. I'm going to X out of that. I'm back in James Frank Holrath's page, and I'm going to click on Details. And we can scroll down and start adding in the information that we learned from our sources. So I have marriage information. I could click on this tab here, and I can go in and I can add the approximate date, about 1908, and that he was married in Missouri. I can click into Frida's page, and I can add her maiden name. And I can, whoops, sorry about that. I clicked the down arrow here. I also have a middle name for Georgia T. Rhine, and I can go ahead and add that information in. So this is just a very, very brief overview on what sources can do for you. The more you learn about sources, the more you can learn about your individual. So thank you and good luck as you go through and you learn about sources and your person.